Hi guys, welcome to another video. Hope you're all keeping well. For this video, I want to talk about what I think are the 10 greatest horror short stories ever written. Now, being both an ardent reader of horror fiction and also a published horror writer myself, I always love to read. You know, a real good creepy short story. And of course, I have read thousands of them in my time. Some good, some bad. However, in this video, I'm going to talk about the good ones and ones which, in my opinion, are some of the greatest horror short stories ever written. Some you may well be familiar with, others not so. Now, Stephen King himself once described a good short horror story as a quick kiss in the dark from a stranger. And I think that is quite an appropriate description for the kind of horror story that really gives you pleasure, really sends the chills running down the spine. Okay, so without further ado, let's just get into my list of the 10 greatest horror short stories ever written. But before I start, I should say that these stories are in no particular order, and also that these selections are stories which have particularly impressed me as a keen horror fan. Now, some of my choices you may agree with, some you may not. Whatever, I just hope that you find this video entertaining and informative. Okay, so let's start with horror story number 10, shall we? And that is The Monkey's Paw by W.W. Jacobs. First published in England in the collection A Lady of the Barge in 1902, this cautionary tale tells the story of an elderly couple who, using a mummified monkey's paw given to them by an army friend, wished their son back to life after losing him in a most horrific accident. A total of 3 wishes are granted to the owner of the monkey's paw, but the wishes come with hellish consequences for tampering with fate. Now, the story's been adapted many times in other media, including plays, films and TV series, and there's even a reference to the story in the 1972 Amicus anthology Tales from the Crypt. Terrifying story really seems to scream the moral into our faces, and that is, be careful what you wish for. So there you go, guys, that's number 10 on my list of greatest horror stories, and that is The Monkey's Paw by W.W. Jacobs. Right, number 9 is The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. First published in the June 26, 1948 issue of The New Yorker, the story is set in a small town which observes an annual tradition known as The Lottery, in which a member of the community is selected by chance, with horrendous consequences because they are cruelly stoned to death. The Lottery from hell, if ever there was, guys, let me tell you. Jackson's story sparked a lot of controversy when it was first published, due to its horrific narrative, and it was even banned actually banned in the Union of South Africa. So there you go, guys, number 9 on my list, and that is The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. Number 8 on my list is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. First published in January 1892 in the New England magazine, the story is regarded as an important early work of American feminist literature due to its great bearing on the mental and physical health of women in the 19th century. Now, narrated in the first person, Gilman's tale centres on a collection of journal entries written by a woman whose physician husband has rented an old mansion for the summer. Now, as a form of treatment, the husband forbids the unnamed woman from working or writing and encourages her to eat well and get plenty of air so that she can recuperate from what he calls a temporary nervous depression. But the story soon starts to take on an extremely dark and sinister turn as the lady notices an unsettling pattern in the yellow wallpaper. Now, with the changing of the lights from day to night, she begins to see, or thinks she sees, what appears to be images of women trapped inside in the yellow wallpaper, desperately seeking escape. So there you go, guys, that's number 8 on my list, and that is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Number 7 on my list of greatest short horror stories is One for the Road by Stephen King. Now, first published in the March-April 1977 issue of Maine, and later in King's 1978 collection, Night Shift, brilliant short story collection. The story is regarded as a kind of short sequel, to Salem's Lot, and introduces some new characters actually that didn't actually appear in the original novel. Now, without giving too much away, all I can say is that if you enjoyed Salem's Lot, then I guarantee you will certainly enjoy this one. It's a fantastic little story. As brief though it is, it recaptures brilliantly, the sheer terror we originally experienced in the original novel, Salem's Lot, as vampires take over the small little town in Maine known as Salem's Lot. So there you go, guys. That's number 7 on my list of great horror short stories, and that is The Brilliant One for the Road by the great Stephen King. Number 6 on my list is another great short story by another modern day master of horror, and that is The Companion by Ramsey Campbell, who lives in my neck of the woods, Wirral. Now, I first read this brilliant tale in Ramsey's excellent short story collection, Dark Companions, back in the late 80s, and thoroughly enjoyed this. It tells the tale of a guy who, avoiding a confrontation with a gang of youths, takes shelter in a deserted fairground. But is it really deserted? Well, when he boards the ghost train, he soon discovers that he's not entirely alone in there, as a sinister presence makes itself known. So there you go, guys. That's number 6 on my list of great short horror stories, and that is The Companion by Ramsey Campbell. Number 5 on my list is The Birds by Daphne du Maurier. First published in a 1952 collection, The Apple Tree, The Birds tells the story of a farmhand, his family and his community that are suddenly attacked by flocks of birds in kamikaze fashion. Now the story is set in du Maurier's home county of Cornwall, and the story was of course actually the inspiration for Alfred Hitchcock's iconic film The Birds, one of my all-time favourite horror movies, by the way. Well, what makes this story particularly disturbing is the fact that we don't really get any solid reason why the birds are suddenly launching these mass attacks on humanity. Great mystery there. So there you go, guys. That's number 5 on my list of great horror short stories, and that is The Birds by Daphne du Maurier. Number 4 on my list of great horror short stories is The Boogeyman by Stephen King. First published in the March 1973 edition of Cavalier magazine, and later reprinted in Stephen King's brilliant short story collection Night Shift. The Boogeyman tells the story of Lester Billings, who talks to a psychiatrist about the murders of his 3 young children. Now, these 3 kids were apparently killed by the Boogeyman, but Lester is a prime suspect when his first child died, and this story it basically unfolds into one really chilling twist, guys, so be warned. So there you go, that is number 4 on my list of great horror short stories, and that is The Boogeyman by Stephen King. Fantastic story. Number 3 on my list is The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe, and a very horrifying story this is, guys. First published in the November 1846 issue of Godey's Lady's Book, the story, set in an unnamed Italian city of carnival time, is about a man exacting a horrible revenge on a friend who, he believes, in his own mind, has insulted him. Now, like several of Poe's stories, the narrative revolves around the person being buried alive, in this case by walling him up. Now, as in The Black Cat and The Telltale Heart, Poe tells the story from the murderer's viewpoint. Different versions of the story have been adapted for both literature and film. So there you go, that is number 3 on my list of great horror short stories, and that is The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Number 2 on my list is The Landlady by the late great Roald Dahl. First published in the New Yorker in 1959 before being included in Dahl's 1960 anthology Kiss Kiss. This tells the story of Billy Weaver, a young man who travels from London to Bath looking for work. Now he takes up lodgings at a boarding house run by a rather eccentric middle-aged landlady. And not only does this strange woman share Norman Bates' hobby of taxidermy, but she also shares his tendencies towards murder. So there you go, guys. That's number 2 on my list of great horror short stories, and that is The Landlady by Roald Dahl. It was also featured in his TV series in 1979, Tales of the Unexpected. Great story. Finally, we come to the number 1 on my list of 10 greatest horror short stories. Now, as I said at the beginning, this list is in no particular order, preference, as I like all 10 stories equally. Right, okay, so here we go then. Number 1 on my list of 10 greatest horror short stories, and a truly terrifying one it is too, guys, is The Man in the Black Suit by Stephen King. First published in the October 31st, 1994 issue of the New Yorker magazine, before being included in the King's 2002 collection, Everything's Eventual. This tells the chilling tale of a now elderly man, Gary, who recalls something which happened to him many, many years ago when he was just a 9-year-old boy, and he was out fishing in the woods. Now, while sitting there with his fishing rod, Gary is approached by a rather strange, sinister-looking man, all dressed in black from head to toe. The man has pale skin, burning eyes like Dracula, and claw-like fingers. Now, as the man begins to tell Gary horrific, horrible things about his family, it slowly dawns on the boy that this strange man is Satan himself, the devil. Gripped by sheer terror and panic, the boy flees back home as fast as his legs can carry him, with the devil in hot pursuit. Now, as the now elderly Gary narrates the story, we learn that he is haunted to this day by his belief that he escaped from the devil that day by, well, sheer luck, really. Now, as the story draws to a close, we also learn that he's terrified by the thought that one day the man in the black suit might show up again. Gary knows that now that he's a very old man, he won't be able to outwit Satan or outrun him, in his old age. So there you go, guys. That's the final selection of my list of 10 greatest horror short stories, and that is the brilliant, terrifying The Man in the Black Suit by Stephen King. Okay, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Have you got a list of your all-time favourites, top 10 horror short stories? Leave them down below. I'd be very interested to read them and that, and discuss them and that. Any kind of stories like to fit in the horror genre, who you think are the greatest stories I've written, leave them down below. And as I always love to hear from the subscribers and that. Have you actually read any of the stories I've listed here? What did you think of them? Have you got any particular favourites? Yeah, comments again. Love talking about horror fiction and that, movies and short stories and that. And of course, being a horror writer myself, I'm always forever looking for good inspiration for new short stories. You get inspiration everywhere, really, in that. Yes, these, as I say, these 10, what I've just said, quoted, they are truly, 10 of the greatest horror short stories ever written. Very, very difficult to narrow them down, but I've got that many great horror short stories what I've read over the years. I can do a couple more lists of them, but they're the 10 that immediately sprang to mind. Some of the best ever written and that. So hopefully I'll be able to do a couple more videos on great horror short stories and that. A lot of great horror short stories in the old pan books of horror. Mary Downby's the great Fontana book of great horror stories, which I read avidly in the 70s and that. Oh yeah, and of course short stories by the greats Ramsey Campbell, Stephen King, Edgar Allan Poe. Yeah, I really enjoyed putting this list together and that, and I say these are the stories you can read again and again. And if you're a writer yourself and that, you might be well advised to read some of these stories, and because they're really well constructed and that, very well written and that, and he really holds your attention from start to finish and that. I mean, Roald Dahl, he wrote some fantastic stories and that. Yeah. Okay, guys, well, that's it. So, usual, please feel free to share, subscribe, comments, and all going well. I'll talk to you all again soon. Thanks.